She didn't just ask for space, she changed the emotional gravity between you and her in a single sentence. And if your first instinct is to chase, explain, convince, or fix everything immediately, you might accidentally turn a temporary problem into a permanent goodbye. Right now, your mind is probably racing. You're replaying every conversation, every text, every moment that felt different. You're asking yourself whether she's losing feelings, whether there's someone else, whether this is the beginning of the end. The uncertainty is louder than the silence itself. But here's something most men never hear. When someone asks for space, the first 24 hours often matter less because of what you say, and more because of what you refuse to do. The average reaction is driven by fear. Fear sends paragraph-long messages. Fear demands reassurance. Fear asks questions that have no immediate answers. Fear mistakes movement for progress. And the hardest truth is that fear is easy to recognize, even through a phone screen. The strongest position you can take isn't pretending you don't care. It's proving, to yourself first, that your emotional stability isn't dependent on instant validation. Think about this carefully. If every minute without her response makes you feel like you're losing control, then your emotions are no longer yours. They're sitting in someone else's hands. That's an exhausting position to live in, and it's a heavy burden for any relationship. Confidence isn't loud, it isn't cold, it isn't playing games. Confidence is remaining emotionally grounded while uncertainty exists. That's incredibly difficult because your brain hates unfinished stories. It wants closure immediately. It wants certainty today. It wants relief now. But healthy relationships aren't built on forcing certainty. They're built on allowing trust to exist even when answers haven't arrived yet. Many men unknowingly create pressure during these moments. They believe they're showing love by checking in every hour, apologizing repeatedly, or asking, "Are you okay?" over and over again. From their perspective, they're fighting for the relationship. From the other person's perspective, it can feel like they're being asked to manage someone else's anxiety while trying to process their own emotions. That's why your first responsibility isn't changing her mind, it's protecting your own mindset. Take a deep look inward. Ask yourself a question that most people avoid. If nothing changed today, who would I become tomorrow? Would you stop eating? Would you lose focus at work? Would your confidence disappear? Or would you remain a man with goals, discipline, friendships, purpose, and direction beyond one relationship? Because here's a reality that transforms relationships more than any clever message ever will. People naturally feel safer with someone whose identity is bigger than the current emotional storm. That doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means refusing to let panic become your personality. During these first hours, silence often feels like weakness. In reality, intentional patience requires far more strength than emotional impulsiveness. Your value isn't determined by how quickly she replies. Your character is revealed by how wisely you respond when she doesn't. And that single decision, whether you react from fear or respond from self-respect, can quietly shape everything that happens next. Now comes the part almost nobody gets right. The silence begins to stretch. Minutes become hours. Every notification makes your heart jump. Every time your phone stays dark, your imagination fills in the blanks with stories that may not even be true. This is where most men lose, not because the relationship was beyond saving, but because they start fighting an invisible battle inside their own minds. The temptation is overwhelming. Maybe I should just send one more message. Maybe she misunderstood what I meant. Maybe if I explain myself better, everything will go back to normal. But notice what's happening. Every thought is focused on controlling an outcome that isn't yours to control. Control feels comforting because it creates the illusion that you're doing something productive. Yet emotional pressure rarely creates emotional closeness. More often, it creates distance. Someone who asks for space is usually asking for room to think, room to breathe, or room to understand their own emotions without feeling rushed. Whether the relationship ultimately continues or not, respecting that request demonstrates maturity. This is one of those moments where emotional discipline becomes more valuable than emotional intensity. A man who is constantly trying to force reassurance communicates something without saying a word. He communicates that uncertainty breaks him. A man who can tolerate uncertainty without abandoning his principles communicates something very different. He communicates that his peace doesn't disappear the moment life becomes uncomfortable. That's a rare quality. Think about the strongest people you've ever respected. Were they calm only when everything was perfect? Or did they remain composed when circumstances became unpredictable? Real confidence isn't tested during certainty, it's tested during silence. This doesn't mean pretending you don't care. It doesn't mean becoming emotionally distant or acting like the relationship never mattered. It simply means recognizing the difference between caring and chasing. Caring says, I respect both of us enough to give this moment the patience it needs. Chasing says, my emotional stability depends on your immediate response. Those are two completely different messages, even if the words sound similar. While you're resisting the urge to reach out again, something important should happen. Your attention needs to return to your own life. Go to the gym if that's already part of your routine. Finish the work you've been putting off. Call a friend, read, learn something. Take a walk without checking your phone every 30 seconds. Not because you're trying to make her jealous, not because you're hoping she'll notice, but because your life deserves your attention, whether someone is texting you or not. There's a dangerous habit many men develop without realizing it. They slowly build their entire emotional world around one person. When that person pulls back, even slightly, everything else begins to collapse. Your goals disappear, your routines fall apart, your confidence vanishes. That isn't love, that's emotional dependence. Healthy relationships are strongest when two complete people choose each other, not when two incomplete people rely on each other to feel whole. And here's something worth remembering. If she genuinely needs time to think, giving her that time shows respect. If she simply wanted reassurance that you'll panic without her, refusing to panic quietly changes the dynamic. Either way, remaining grounded benefits you, because regardless of what happens next, you're building something that lasts longer than any relationship. You're building emotional resilience, and that's the quality that allows a man to face uncertainty without surrendering his self-respect, his purpose, or the quiet confidence that makes him stronger than his circumstances. Here's where the situation becomes deeply psychological. After the first day, your emotions usually stop reacting to reality and start reacting to imagination. And imagination is a dangerous advisor when you're emotionally invested. Your mind begins collecting tiny pieces of information and turning them into dramatic conclusions. She was online. She viewed your story. She changed her profile picture. She didn't like your latest post. She hasn't opened your message. None of these things, by themselves, tell the full story. Yet when emotions are running high, the brain treats uncertainty like evidence. It fills every blank with the answer that hurts the most. This is why emotionally strong men learn a skill that changes every relationship they will ever have. They separate facts from assumptions. The fact is that she asked for space. The assumption is that she no longer cares. The fact is that she hasn't replied yet. The assumption is that the relationship is already over. The fact is that you don't have all the information. And until you do, every story your mind creates is just that, a story. Most emotional mistakes happen because men react to assumptions instead of reality. Think about how much energy gets wasted trying to solve problems that don't even exist yet. Hours disappear. Sleep becomes difficult. Work feels impossible. You replay conversations 100 different ways, hoping one version changes the present. But life doesn't move backward, it only moves forward. That's why your focus has to shift from replaying the past to strengthening yourself in the present. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. Outside of this relationship, what are you becoming? If someone looked at your life today, would they see a man moving toward his goals? Or would they see someone waiting for permission to feel happy again? Your purpose should never disappear because your relationship feels uncertain. In fact, moments like these reveal whether your purpose was truly yours or whether it quietly became dependent on another person's attention. Here's another truth that many men overlook. People are naturally drawn to emotional consistency, not perfection, not endless confidence, consistency. The man who stays respectful when things are good and remains respectful when things become difficult is far more trustworthy than someone whose personality changes every time emotions rise. That means avoiding dramatic reactions. Avoid posting cryptic messages online. Avoid trying to make her jealous. Avoid sending emotional speeches hoping they'll suddenly change everything. Those actions usually come from a desire to influence someone's emotions instead of managing your own. And emotional maturity begins when you realize the only mind you truly control is your own. Ironically, the more desperately someone tries to regain control over another person, the more control they lose over themselves. That's a lesson worth remembering for the rest of your life. Because relationships aren't just about attraction, they're about emotional safety. People feel safer around someone who doesn't create chaos every time uncertainty appears. They feel safer around someone who can listen without exploding, who can wait without panicking, who can care without controlling. That doesn't guarantee every relationship will last. Nothing can guarantee that, but it guarantees something even more valuable. It guarantees that no matter what decision another person makes, you won't abandon your own character in the process. And when you protect your character before protecting your ego, you begin transforming from a man who reacts to every emotional wave into a man who chooses his response with intention, patience, and quiet strength. There comes a moment when the silence stops feeling like a waiting game and starts becoming a mirror. Not a mirror that reflects her feelings, a mirror that reflects yours. Because when communication slows down, distractions disappear. You're left alone with your thoughts, your habits, and the relationship you have with yourself. Many men discover something surprising during this stage. The pain they're experiencing isn't only about missing her. Part of it comes from losing the routine they built around her presence. The morning messages, the nightly conversations, the constant updates throughout the day. When those habits suddenly disappear, the empty space can feel overwhelming. The brain mistakes the loss of routine for the loss of identity. That's why this moment isn't just about a relationship. It's about rebuilding your center. Ask yourself an honest question. If no one was watching your life today, would you still be proud of the way you're living? Would you still wake up with purpose? Would you still train your body? Would you still invest in your career? Would you still keep your promises to yourself? Or were those things quietly pushed aside while your entire focus shifted toward one person? Strong relationships grow when two people continue growing as individuals. The moment one person's entire world begins revolving around the other, balance slowly disappears. That isn't because caring is wrong. It's because losing yourself never strengthens a connection. Think back to the version of yourself that first attracted people into your life. You probably had ambitions. You laughed more easily. You pursued interests because they mattered to you, not because they impressed someone else. You were building something. Somewhere along the way, many men unknowingly replace growth with maintenance. Instead of asking, "How can I become better?" they start asking, "How can I avoid losing this relationship?" Those are completely different mindsets. One creates confidence, the other creates fear. Fear constantly looks outward. Confidence begins inward. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally unavailable or pretending relationships don't matter. Healthy love absolutely matters. Meaningful connection matters. Commitment matters, but they should add to your life, not replace the foundation of it. That's why these quiet days can become unexpectedly valuable. Instead of treating them as punishment, treat them as preparation. Read the book you've been postponing. Improve a skill you've neglected. Reconnect with friends or family. Take care of your health. Finish the project you've been delaying. Every small promise you keep to yourself restores a little more confidence than you had yesterday. And confidence built through action lasts much longer than confidence borrowed from someone else's approval. Eventually, one of two things will happen. Communication may resume, or life may lead both of you in different directions. Neither outcome changes what matters most: the man you're becoming while the future remains uncertain. Because relationships can begin, relationships can end, circumstances can change. But your discipline, your integrity, your emotional stability, and your purpose are investments that stay with you long after any single chapter closes. The greatest mistake would be spending these days trying to predict someone else's next move. The greatest opportunity is using these days to strengthen your own. When you do that, something subtle begins to change. You stop measuring your worth by how quickly someone comes back. You begin measuring it by how faithfully you continue moving forward, even when life refuses to give immediate answers. And that's a mindset no period of silence can ever take away from you. At some point, the silence reaches a place where your emotions begin asking a different question. Not, "Why hasn't she replied?" but, "What happens if she never does?" That question feels uncomfortable because it forces you to face something every man tries to avoid. The possibility that not every story ends the way you hoped. And yet, this is exactly where emotional maturity begins. Most people believe strength is getting someone to stay. Real strength is knowing that your future doesn't disappear if someone chooses a different path. Read that again in your own mind. Your future does not depend on one conversation, one relationship, one moment, or one person's decision. That's difficult to accept because your emotions naturally magnify what feels important today. They convince you that this moment defines your entire life. It doesn't. It defines how you respond, and that response becomes part of your character. Imagine two different men facing the same situation. The first spends every day checking her social media, searching for hidden meanings, comparing himself to imaginary competition, and waiting for a notification that determines whether he has a good day or a bad one. The second acknowledges the uncertainty, feels the disappointment honestly, and then continues building his life one decision at a time. Both men experienced the same silence. Only one allowed it to become his identity. The difference isn't luck, it's perspective. One believes happiness must return from the outside. The other understands that stability is built from within. There's another truth that rarely gets discussed. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is stop trying to control where it's going. That doesn't mean becoming passive. It means accepting that genuine connection cannot be forced. Respect cannot be negotiated. Trust cannot be demanded. Affection cannot be argued into existence. The strongest relationships grow because both people freely choose to invest in them. Choice matters. Without choice, connection becomes obligation. And obligation rarely creates lasting closeness. This is also the moment to examine your standards. Not your expectations for her, your expectations for yourself. Are you becoming someone who communicates with honesty, someone who keeps his word, someone who manages emotions instead of letting emotions manage him, someone who continues improving whether life feels easy or difficult? Those questions matter because they remain valuable, regardless of how this particular relationship unfolds. It's easy to work on yourself when everything is going well. It's much harder to do it when your heart feels uncertain. That's where real growth happens, not in comfort, in consistency. Every workout you complete, every goal you pursue, every promise you keep, every moment you resist acting out of panic. Those aren't small victories. They're evidence that you're becoming emotionally stronger, and emotional strength doesn't make you less caring. It makes your care healthier, because when you stop chasing certainty, you start creating stability. When you stop seeking constant validation, you start developing genuine confidence. And when your confidence comes from your values instead of another person's attention, something remarkable happens, whether she reaches out tomorrow, next week, or not at all. You no longer feel like your entire life is standing still. You're moving forward. Not because the uncertainty disappeared, but because you finally realized that your purpose was never meant to wait for someone else's decision. Eventually, the silence ends. Maybe it's with a message, maybe it's with a conversation, maybe it's simply with the realization that life has quietly carried both of you into different seasons. Whatever happens, the moment will reveal far more than the relationship itself. It will reveal who you became while you were waiting, because anyone can remain calm when everything is going according to plan. Character is revealed when the outcome is uncertain. If she reaches out, don't rush to erase everything you've learned over the past few days. Don't immediately fall back into fear. Don't pretend nothing happened. Listen carefully. Speak honestly. Respectfully share your perspective. And just as importantly, be willing to hear hers. Healthy communication isn't about winning an argument or proving who was right. It's about understanding each other well enough to decide whether you can move forward together with greater clarity. If the relationship continues, let it continue because both of you choose it, not because either of you was pressured into it. If it doesn't continue, let that ending teach you rather than define you. Every meaningful relationship leaves something behind. Sometimes it's beautiful memories. Sometimes it's difficult lessons. Often it's both. The mistake many men make is believing that every ending represents personal failure. Life is more complex than that. People grow, circumstances change, priorities evolve. Not every relationship is meant to last forever, but every relationship has the potential to teach you something valuable about communication, emotional balance, patience, and self-respect. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this: never build your identity on something you cannot completely control. You cannot control another person's feelings. You cannot control another person's timing. You cannot control another person's choices. But you can control your integrity. You can control your discipline. You can control how you respond under pressure. You can choose to become a man whose confidence is built on values rather than validation. That kind of confidence doesn't disappear when life becomes uncertain. It grows stronger. One day, you'll look back on this moment. You won't remember every minute you spent staring at your phone. You won't remember every anxious thought that kept you awake. You'll remember the decision you made, the decision to stop letting fear dictate your actions, the decision to protect your peace instead of chasing immediate reassurance, the decision to become someone who remains steady when emotions try to pull him in every direction. And that's the quiet transformation most people never notice. They think growth happens during victories. In reality, some of the strongest growth happens in the moments when nobody is applauding, when you're choosing patience over panic, purpose over obsession, and self-respect over emotional impulse. So if someone asks for space, don't see it only as a test of the relationship. See it as a test of the man you're becoming. Because relationships may come and go, circumstances may change, and uncertainty will always be part of life. But a man who learns to stay grounded, communicate with maturity, and continue moving forward with purpose carries something far more valuable than the guarantee of any single relationship. He carries a quiet confidence that no silence can ever take away. And that is the kind of strength that changes not only your relationships, but the direction of your entire life.